Codependence Anonymous Stories, My Thanksgiving Story, page 139. The date is November 22nd, 1990, Thanksgiving Day. All of our children and friends have gone home and the dishes are done. Suddenly, this seems like the perfect time to express my thankfulness by sharing my story of abuse, codependence, and recovery with my Coda friends. I was born in 1944, an only child in an alcoholic family. My father was in the Army and my mother and I lived with my maternal grandparents. I came from multi-generations of alcoholism and abuse. It seems many of the men and women in my extended family were addicts and codependents. I want to say up front that I do not blame my caretakers for the pain I suffered as a child. I realize that they too were victims and didn't have the advantage of recovery. They could only pass on to me what they knew. I take full responsibility for my life and all the pain, believing that I chose this lifetime to grow in specific ways. This belief does not diminish the terrible effects of my abuse and the creation of a codependent and addicted adult. The first time I saw my father, I was about 4 months old and had become his incest victim. I had always known that I was a survivor, but it wasn't until I went into hypnotherapy in 1979 that I discovered how early the abuse had started and how brutal the attacks were. Incest with Daddy went on until the summer I was 13. It included fondling, rape, oral sex, shared sex with other men and children, threats with burning and knives, and forcing me to watch while he raped and butchered animals. I felt really crazy while all this was going on, and I dissociated a great deal. Sometimes Daddy was gentle and quiet. Sometimes he was brutal and added beatings with his fists to the rapes. Always I felt like I wasn't there, like I was nothing, a nobody. There were other sexual abusers, my maternal grandfather and uncle, 5 family friends, 2 priests, and my mother. The abuse I received from these people was sometimes less traumatic and lasted a shorter time than with my father, but served to tear down my trust and any feelings of self-worth. Every time someone touched me, I froze. I wanted so badly to scream, "No!" But I was afraid, too afraid. I just went deep inside myself with rage and self-hatred. My mother was very abusive, both physically and verbally. She also came from an alcoholic family and was a victim of incest, although she still denies it. Her methods of punishment included slapping, kicking, and knocking me down with her fists, screaming at me, shaming and humiliating me, locking me in my room or my closet, not allowing me to come out to go to the bathroom, and forcing me to get up in the middle of the night to tell my drunken father to go away. I felt totally worthless and hopeless with my mother. I have no memory of ever being held and nurtured by her. When I got sick, she made me stay in bed and brought food to me with her face covered buy toilet paper so that she wouldn't catch my illness. She would lay the food down and leave. She denied that she knew that I was being sexually abused until I told her when I was 12. Last year, when my memory of a specific event returned spontaneously, I learned that her denial was not true. She had caught me with my father when I was 3 years old and almost killed me by beating and kicking me as he fled the scene. I felt totally abandoned by her. I believe that mother also sexually abused me. Daddy often worked at night. When I would get up to go to the bathroom, mother would call me to come and get in bed with her. It always felt creepy and made me get real warm all over. I can recall a few of the details, but then I must have dissociated because I still don't fully remember. I don't know for sure what happened. I only know that those were frightening and unpleasant experiences. I feel terrible shame in sharing that secret. My mother's family was Southern Baptist, and so was I, until mother got interested in the Catholic Church when I was 9 years old. She put me in a parochial school and forced me to be baptized. I screamed and yelled, but was held over the baptismal font by the priest and my grandparents, all of whom kept telling me that I really did want this. They were wrong. I was torn between my mother's desire and my grandmother's hatred of my mother's new religion. I was terribly afraid that I would lose my grandmother. The fight between her and mother finally got so bad that I was not allowed to see grandmother for 2 years. Between the two denominations, I was taught to fear a God who was judgmental and who condemned people to hell for all eternity. I tried hard to fulfill expectations, but I knew I was never good enough. My spirit was crushed. I often sat on the floor of my prison closet and wondered what I had done to be hated by God. That was a horrible ordeal for a bewildered child to endure. My grandmother, who I call Mama, was the saving grace of my childhood. Even though she had her faults, she gave me a sense of self-worth and self-esteem that I found in few other places. I lived with her until I was almost 3 years old and spent as much time with her after that as I possibly could. I have no idea whether or not she knew about any of my abuse. I wanted to tell her, but I didn't until I was an adult. I went back to live with her and my alcoholic grandfather when I was 17. I stayed with them until I married at 19. There are few things in this life that I'm as grateful for as I am for her presence. She sustained, supported, and expressed love for me as no one else did. Thank you, Mama. I went all the way through parochial school and graduated when I was 18. I was too emotionally insecure and had been sheltered too much to be able to go to work or to college. So I got pregnant instead. I married my childhood sweetheart, who was several months younger than me. He also was from an alcoholic home. We didn't have much chance. Our first baby was a stillborn son, and that was a crushing blow. My young husband struggled to get an education and work while I worked several jobs at home. In 3 years I got pregnant again. This time I was doubly blessed with twin boys, but my marriage was in deep trouble, and I began taking out my rage on my children. I became the verbally and physically abusive parent my mother had been. By the time my children were 3 years old, I divorced my husband and went to work outside the home. I put my boys into an excellent daycare center run by the city in which we lived. We all received wonderful care from the staff and a social worker. Eventually, I was able to stop abusing my boys. For that, I am deeply grateful. I remarried 3 years later. This time, my codependence took another twist. I married a man who was 19 years older than me, with 5 children. We both brought tremendous baggage to the marriage. We had persevered by the grace of God and have been married for 18 years. We've worked out a successful and rewarding relationship. Our families, however, have never blended, and we have experienced a lot of heartache. It is very important for me to acknowledge that my husband has been my strongest supporter. He came into Coda just 3 months after I did and is very active. He has taken care of me through many serious illnesses, and I will always be grateful. We share a common spiritual philosophy which is of the utmost importance to both of us. We have grown tremendous in Coda. We no longer expect each other to meet all of our individual needs. We attend Coda meetings together and separately. We enjoy each other and are Coda friends. As a codependent adult, I have experienced lots of problems that I will share with you. Drug addiction, love and sex addiction, compulsive spending, people-pleasing, caretaking, child abusing, isolating, arrogance, dishonesty, and an eating disorder, to name a few. One of my biggest problems has been prescription drug addiction. I certainly was genetically predisposed to alcoholism, but my drugs of choice turned out to be codeine and halcyon. I became addicted after numerous surgeries. I remained on drugs for about 5 years, after which I went through rehabilitation and still struggle with this. I was in Coda for a year before I finally got off drugs. It was one of the scariest things I have ever done. I had an incredible amount of intractable pain in my legs and back, and had no idea how to survive without drugs. I really didn't know how much emotional pain was being dulled by the drugs. It was my Coda program and friends who sustained me through that battle. One of the ways codependence manifested itself in my life was through illness. My mother is a hypochondriac and taught me early that I was weak and prone to illness. I developed diabetes when I was 10 years old. I learned that getting sick got me out of having to deal with a lot of life. I rarely faked illness. I was already deep within the fabric. It was already deep within the fabric of my life. I had hepatitis when I was 11. I had migraine headaches at 13, vaginal and bladder infections at 15, and a dislocated sacroiliac at 17. I had flu and colds frequently. I had undergone 17 surgeries for eyes, breasts, wrists, and ankles, as well as a C-section and hysterectomy. I developed ulcers and a severely contracting colon. I have diabetic neuropathy, which causes the nerves in my legs to die. By the time I was 36, I was trying to cope with the stress of my codependence combined with long-term diabetes that resulted in total blindness in both eyes. That was also the point at which the pain in my back and legs became unbearable. I had fought long and hard. I had undergone a great deal of therapy and had read every self-help book I could find. I had availed myself of alternative healing methods of many kinds. Nothing had helped. When I was 37, I tried to kill myself with an overdose of drugs and alcohol. When I was 41, I tried again. I was serious about it. I had given up and had no will to live. My higher power obviously had different plans for me and brought me through miraculously both times. During all those years of chaos, I worked to put myself through college. I was stopped many times with illness and 3 episodes of blindness. But each time I came back and kept going. In 1986, I finally graduated with a 3.79 grade point average and a Bachelor of Science degree in counseling and guidance. I thought the day would never come. It had taken me 10 years. About 4 years ago, I was in group therapy for incest recovery. Our therapist was very good about informing us about things she thought we might be interested in and might find helpful. I remember the night she brought a copy of a popular book on codependence to the group. I had been in Al-Anon and ACA for several years, but I had never heard the term codependence. That same evening, she also told us about Codependence Anonymous. Thank you, Diane. I attended my first CODA meeting in August of 1987. When I first started attending meetings, I was still on drugs. I had not admitted that I was an addict. My first year in CODA was pretty dull, but I did learn a lot. I sort of stored the information until I could get sober enough to use it. I worked through a step study and made my first amends. I had no way of being very honest, but at least it was a start. After I came out of drug rehabilitation, I worked the steps again with a sponsor and started to make my amends again. This time the program really began to work. I had already been blessed by a close relationship with my higher power before I came to CODA. Even after my unpleasant childhood experiences with religion, I continued to search, trying a number of Western-style religions as well as atheism. I went through a 10-year dark night of the soul and then my higher power brought me to an Eastern philosophy, one that answered all my needs. This philosophy was a gentle and kind, overflowing with love and acceptance. It opened my heart and taught me compassion, understanding, forgiveness, tolerance, and truthfulness. There was no threat of judgment or punishment, and no condemnation of other spiritual expressions. This prepared me perfectly for the 12 steps. It opened me to the phenomenon of paradox and taught me that we are all a part of the One. Finally, I had come to my spiritual home, and for that I am deeply grateful. I began to take risks by doing the 12-step work in Coda. That was when I really began to grow up. I felt terribly inadequate and unworthy, and that I had nothing to offer, but I offered anyway. I remember how absolutely frozen I felt the first time I spoke, the first time I facilitated a meeting, the first time I answered calls on our meeting line. Somehow, I was given the courage, and once I got a taste of service, I knew I would never stop. I spent about 25 to 30 hours a week doing CODA service work at the community level and have recently volunteered at the state level. I am truly thankful to be able to give back in some small measure with what I have been blessed. I know that I will be working on my recovery for the rest of my life. The deep scars from the abuse I received do not heal quickly. For the first time in my life, however, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I'm on the road to recovery, and I have hope. I have CODA and the 12 steps. I have my higher power. I have the fellowship of Codependence Anonymous. I am learning to release the past and old negative thought patterns that have continued to harm me through the years. I am finally learning that I'm worthy of affirmation, love, and respect. I will be okay, and in the meantime, I am in great company. I continue to work on areas of denial, especially in regard to being diabetic. I still have a great deal of terrible eating in a healthy way, testing blood sugar levels, and keeping accurate records for my doctor. Even though I've suffered a great deal of damage due to diabetes, I still don't value myself enough to take the care I deserve. I also still tend to get enmeshed in relationships with people who take advantage and abuse me, although this doesn't occur as easily as it did. I find it very difficult to say no and find it very hard to call and ask for help. Consequently, I still live with a lot of emotional and physical pain. My attitude has changed about these kinds of things, however. I no longer need to be perfect. I know that I'm growing and developing at the rate that's right for me. I know that my higher power is the essence of all that comes into my life in all ways. I have come to believe that I'm not only a precious child, but a divine child. I no longer fear that I was created to be tortured and punished. Since coming into Coda, I have discovered that I was created out of the beauty and splendor of the universe. I am a beautiful and sparkling soul. I am deeply grateful to my higher power. I want to say how thankful I am to the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous for giving us the 12 steps. I'm especially grateful for the program of Codependence Anonymous. Last, but by no means least, I thank the Coda community in Dallas, Texas, for all the love, support, and opportunities to grow and share. I am grateful to be that which God intended, precious and free. By Jenny C.